On today's Transport Evolved, Tesla's Q4 earnings, a major scary security problem with cars in general, and the Chevrolet Bolt, gets confirmed for production. These stories and more coming up next on Transport Evolved. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode number 229 of Transport Evolved, recorded on Sunday, February 15th, 2015. My name is Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield, and I've just realised, was chuckling because we've had no manner of technical problems getting the show on the road today. There is no live version because technology just isn't working, isn't playing ball. And I just realised that it was Friday the 13th, and I had a fantastic Friday the 13th last Friday. So maybe this is kind of retribution for, for that. Thanks for staying with us and watching the show today. We've got two fantastic guests. We are a little time constrained due to some technical problems, so we're just going to push right in. Joining us from a snowy New York, but I don't know how snowy, Mr. John Voelcker of Green Car Reports. How are you today, sir?
Hello. It's bitterly cold in New York City, but we don't actually have any fresh snow. Up in the mountains, however, I'm told there's something like 18 inches and wind chill well below 0 Fahrenheit.
Ooh, and I know that your colleagues, as it were, further up the East Coast, they're having a deuce of a time, aren't they? Boston, anyone north of not Boston, basically. And also joining me from Arizona, where they have no snow, Joe Dugandzic. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing great. I was just trying to look up the weather on my iPod Touch.
You know, I always ask.
Tell you.
I'm the Brits. You know what?
I'm sure it's somewhere above 60 degrees at least.
Oh. And you are from lightinganswers.com, and you've got a fantastic YouTube channel talking about lighting, etc., which we'll come to shortly in a second. But John, you've been busy this week. You've been off to Chicago, to the Chicago Auto Show, 2015 Chicago Auto Show. But you've also written or presided over a very, very interesting article this week on Green Car Reports, where you are one of the, I suppose you're the boss in chief. And I can't hear a thing you're saying, so I'm just going to keep talking, and then I'll fix it when you start talking. The story I want you to talk about is reasons why the Tesla Model X has been delayed. Now, there's been lots of rumours flying around, and you spoke to some suppliers in the automotive industry, tier one suppliers, I presume, and you talked about some of the rumours flying around and some of the challenges that suppliers say Tesla's having bringing the Tesla Model S crossover SUV to market. So take it away.
Sure. There are really sort of three areas where the Model X is a more challenging vehicle to develop than the Model S that preceded it. The first is range. As we've talked about, it's a heavier vehicle, it's larger, and for highway range in particular, it has a much larger cross-section, which requires you to push aside more wind, which of course requires more energy. So there's been a lot of discussion about whether Tesla is being challenged in trying to get acceptable range figures for the Model X with what we presume, at least for the base version, to be the 85 kilowatt hour battery pack that's used in the Model S. That Model S has ranges of 265 or 270 miles. Are they having trouble getting the Model X much above, say, 225? And what does Tesla consider to be an acceptable minimal range for that vehicle? So that's one area. The second area then is the Falcon doors. These are something that's never really been done before on any kind of mass-produced car, and so there are a lot of engineering challenges. One of them being that because the car's body structure is aluminum. Aluminum is very light and it's good at spreading loads over large areas, but it's not necessarily all that good at handling very concentrated point loads like those that would be exerted by the torsion bar springs that are going to sort of bring the doors up and then articulate them into the center of the car.
Mm-hmm.
So the thought is that Tesla is still working on some of the engineering to make that structure in the roof handle the doors properly without deforming. And then the last of the three challenges is really towing. The challenge with towing is that it puts an extreme load on your electric motors if you effectively add a few thousand pounds to the load those motors have to move, which creates an enormous amount of heat. So the question is Tesla's existing liquid cooling perhaps not sufficient? Do they have to go to some sort of air-conditioned cooling? And what does that add to the vehicle? So adding those things up, there are a lot of engineering challenges with the Model X, and the thought is that overcoming those things, which is what auto engineers do, is why the thing was delayed numerous times.
And it's a very interesting thing, really, John, that some of the engineering challenges that are being sort of talked about, special alloys for the roof, right?
Yeah, alloys and or reinforcements from things like magnesium or titanium or whatever the engineering solution may be. And the thought is that they're trying out lots and lots of different solutions for reinforcements, blends of material and whatnot. But I mean, there are sort of reasons that sliding doors and hinge doors are common. Among them that we know how to engineer those loads, and you don't have to have a mechanism that's quite as complicated.
Joe, I don't know if you've been following the Model X development at all, but it does seem to be quite a headache there for Tesla.
It is a headache, and I have been following it. Not that I can afford a Model X at this point, but or a Model S, but I have been following it, and I think the Falcon Wing doors have been, one of the major features, or basically, I don't know if you want to call it a selling point, but it's one of the most unique parts of that vehicle. And I do agree, and I've been following, in terms of it's the aluminum, and it's very difficult to get this to work with that material because of all the points that John said in terms of the type of structure that they would have to put in place to mitigate the properties of aluminum. And I know it's been, the vehicle's been delayed numerous times now, but they seem fairly insistent that they're going to release it this fall. I would think that at this point, they would have to have these engineering challenges worked out for the most part, since that would be 6 months away, and they would have to, prep for production and ramp up at this point. I would think that if they're actually still working to solve challenges in, mid-February, I think it could be pushed out even farther, unless I'm just not aware of how things work in the automotive industry.
Well, we'll come to some of the challenges and some of the supposed solutions later on the show, because Tesla, obviously, we're talking about the Q4 earnings.
Right.
But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is, obviously, you run this site, Lighting Answers, and you did a fantastic video about Valentine's Day, which, of course, was yesterday. And you talked about recreating romantic lighting. And it is completely unrelated to cars, and maybe you can answer this in a few sentences. But I'm curious, because I love candles. I always have loved candles, and I like kind of that faint light that they emit. And I do wonder, is there ever such a thing as a digital replacement for a candle?
Well, I have one right here, and I talked about it on the show, and essentially there really is not. You have these electronic candles, and it might try and actually move it so that it's actually in the shot. There it is, that I can see anyways. And the electronic candle right here is really not a replacement. It's just one of these things that they say, well, this is good, but really there is something about the flame and the original way that we've had light for many, many years, which is fire, that is not replicated easily in any type of modern LED light. And that's why I did a show that really focused on candles. And I talked a little bit about colored light and whatnot, but candles and romance really go hand in hand, and the industry has not really replicated anything in terms of digital light that can take it on in terms of a competitor. And that's just my opinion. Maybe we're a few years away, but we're not quite there. The old incandescent light bulbs, which glow because they're literally the filaments are on fire, is a good substitute, of course. But there's just nothing quite like having a real candle for romantic settings.
There you go. So if you want to watch Joe's video in full, go to youtube.com/lighting answers.
Yeah, and actually, I wish I owned the name lightinganswers.com, but I actually do not. That's why I had answers.lighting, because there's a new .com kind of thing called .lighting. But anyways,
cool. Excellent. Yeah. Fantastic. So. All right. Well, we'll also talk about in part one, the news. And I joked about this in the intro to the show. Those might notice that I said Volt instead of Bolt. That's V rather than B, but it is a bit of an automotive insider joke at the moment, isn't it, John? Chicago Auto Show, Chevrolet, or GM rather, announced, yes, the Chevrolet Bolt is coming to market. It's going to be produced next year, towards the end of next year. It's going to be made on the same production line, which I have been reliably informed is not called the Orion production line, but the Orion production line. Orion. There you go, John. So tell us what we know about this car from Chicago that we didn't know before.
Well, and I too was corrected by a Midwestern colleague. It's the Orion plant. Accent on the first syllable, not the second. The Orion plant is one that was set up to produce the subcompact Sonic in the U.S. It actually had a special deal with the UAW where they had additional wage concessions under the theory that it wasn't going to be economical, even at the reduced wages post-bankruptcy, to make subcompacts in the U.S. And
right.
In fact, very few are made in America. They tend to be made in other NAFTA countries, most likely in Mexico. But that plant is relatively underutilized at the moment because with gas below $2 a gallon in many states, subcompacts are not particularly selling. So they have extra capacity. What GM announced at the Chicago Auto Show was that the Volt will go into production and it will be built at the Orion plant. They didn't specifically talk about timing, and in fact, it was a fairly minimalist announcement that said essentially, yes, we're going to build it at the plant, and we'll talk about everything else later.
Right.
So expect a series of additional announcements. But what we know thus far, or what I've gleaned in talking to, as we say, sources, is that the shape of the concept car for the Volt, subcompact 5-door hatchback, is roughly what's going to go into production.
Right.
There will be detail changes, but roughly what you saw is going to be what's on the showroom floor. The interior you saw is not. That's pretty much concept interior, and as the 2016 Volt probably shares a lot of its interior with the next version of the Chevy Cruze,
right.
I would expect the Volt with a B electric car to share a lot of its interior with the upcoming next Chevy Sonic, some of whose underpinnings it will share as well.
And the Sonic and the Bolt with the B, they share the same Gamma 2 platform, and it kind of brings us to the question of how similar these two cars might look. We haven't yet, I believe, seen the 2017 Sonic. I wouldn't be surprised if these two vehicles look very similar. In doing so, in building a car that was the Sonic, a more upright version of the Sonic, that would tie in rather well. I think maybe against something like the Kia Soul in the urban-ite marketplace. I don't know if you feel about that car in the same way.
I think it's important to point out that people, I see a lot of comments about, it's just going to be a Chevy Sonic with an electric powertrain. Platform sharing now works where you share stuff that buyers don't see. The crash structure, essentially the cowl, all of how you handle the front end and distribute the crash loads through the structure, that stuff's enormously expensive to develop. And so that will be shared. But you can build totally different bodies on it. Obviously, the Volt with a B is going to have a flat belly pan that will have the battery underneath it. So that's going to be all different structure, even if the rear suspensions are the same, and so on and so forth. So
Right.
it will be the same size and roughly the same five-door upright hatchback shape as the next Sonic, and it may have bits and pieces underneath that are the same, but they won't be the same car.
Interesting.
Onto the Soul, which you mentioned. The Soul was really one of two green cars at the Chicago Auto Show. Kia did a very clever thing. The Soul has been an enormous hit for Kia in the States. They've sold, I think it was 140,000 of them, which is a phenomenal number. It basically demolished all of the rest of the tall wagons put together. And the concept that they showed, called the Trailster, gives the Soul four-wheel drive, but by sticking an electric motor and battery pack between the rear axle, making what's called a through-the-road hybrid.
Right.
Gasoline engine up front, electric motor and battery pack in the rear, and you can use one, you can use the other, or you can use both together.
Right.
So they didn't actually say hybrid in the title. It's called the Kia Trailster EAWD concept.
And this is a problem that we have here, John, because you got a lot of people excited. I know you were one of the people who'd heard the rumours about it going to be a hybrid, and I think you were spot on with that prediction. This vehicle has got a 1.6 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery. We should probably note that Hyundai and Kia do have access to some pretty advanced battery technology. But this is only 1.6 kilowatt hours. It does have an all-electric range of 2 or 3 miles. It does not have a plug. But
Right.
there is potential in the future, John, should this become a production model.
Indeed. And in its latest iteration of hybrids in both the Hyundai Sonata and the Kia Optima, they introduced both the conventional hybrid with the small pack and the plug-in hybrid with the larger pack and the plug. So if, in fact, this works out, it's not inconceivable to have a plug-in Kia Soul as well, which would then give the Soul the interesting lineup of two different gasoline engines, a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, and, of course, the Soul EV, which Kia also announced, by the way, it's going to sell outside of California as well, although they haven't specified which states as yet.
I hope it comes north. Haha. Joe, do you think something like the Kia Trailster concept would fly well in Arizona? Obviously, lots of open spaces, lots of open dirt tracks that people can drive on.
I think so. I see actually a fair number of the Kia Soul, the hatchback vehicles out and about. They seem to be, I think they nailed it with certain types of vehicles that they're really selling to, the younger generation. And at the end of the day, if they've got something that's going to be, for, getting out and going out to explore the high country and whatnot, and something that's got maybe a little bit of extra power to get over hills and whatnot, then I think that's great. I think they'll do very well with it. But again, this is specifically a concept right now. They're not necessarily aiming this for production right now. Have they said that? Or?
No, they have
haven't
not.
committed to production, but Michael Sprague of Kia, at the end of his presentation said, this is just a concept car now. People have been asking, is this going to go into production? All I can say is it's happened before.
Yes.
That's about as close to a yes as you're going to get.
Yeah.
All right. Mitsubishi. We'll blat through these really quickly. Oh, but before we get to Mitsubishi, John, I do want to ask you about the Bolt. Do we think there's going to be an upmarket version of the Bolt, either under the Buick or the Cadillac name tag? Any hints on that?
No hints at all, and clearly, as with the Volt with a V, they want to mass brand it under Chevrolet, which is by far their biggest selling brand globally. And so I would expect the Bolt with a V to come as a Chevy first. If they do offer upscale models, they're going to have something more and better, whether it's more range or more luxury or both.
Right. And interestingly, I mean, I brought that in really into the show notes because people keep saying, the Tesla Model 3 will cross-shop with the Bolt. It will not. It will cross-shop against the Nissan Leaf, the next generation car. All right, so Mitsubishi CG-PHEV concept car. Is this...
We can deal with this really quickly because it's the same concept car as I remembered once I saw it that I had photographed in October 2013 when it was actually launched at the Tokyo Motor Show.
Right.
Mitsubishi's been trotting out a trio of concepts at different U.S. Auto shows. This is their take on a plug-in hybrid full-size SUV. And if it were to come to market, it would be, I suppose, the replacement for the Montero,
Right.
At least in North America. But the Outlander plug-in hybrid is the one that's going to come first. This is a ways down the road.
Right. Fair enough. All right. And finally, for the segment, lithium-sulfur batteries have always had a bit of a problem, John. But this week, some academics claim to have solved the problem. Lithium-sulfur batteries have a higher energy density than lithium-ion batteries, which are what we currently use in most modern plug-in cars and many hybrids now, increasing number of hybrids. But lithium-sulfur have a higher energy density, which means they can store more energy per unit mass. But they've had some problems, haven't they, in the past, John? But now, tell us about some of these fixes that academics claim to have.
Well, one of the problems is that the sulfur tends to pollute the electrolyte over time, and as with a whole lot of battery chemistry, this is a case of testing out different materials to see if you can solve the problem. Sulfur also, in over time, tends to insulate, and so you get less surface available for the ions to transfer from one electrode to the other. So they were testing some new materials, and I'm going to look up my own article. I think you will forgive me, but I want to make sure I get this exactly right. The titanium oxide was the usual solution for those problems, but researchers from the University of Waterloo in Ontario, which I should point out is my better half's alma mater, working with folks from BASF, chemical company, found that nanosheets of manganese dioxide work even better. And I'm going to stop there. You can read the paper. It's linked in our article if you want to, but my grasp of basic battery chemistry stops right about there.
And so does mine, which was quite cruel of me to bring
And
you in.
so does mine.
And so we're going to have a quick a quick ad break. We normally would obviously have a slightly longer version, but essentially, if you support Transport Evolved by telling others about us, your help will be appreciated. You don't have to go to our shop. You just have to tell other people about what we get up to. Tweet us on Twitter. Share us on social media network sites, etc., etc., and of course subscribe to us on YouTube. All right, so we're on to part 2 of the show, and this is a really troubling story. Senator Markey, Edward Markey from Massachusetts, last Monday published a paper talking about cybersecurity in connected vehicles. Now, I got some heat last week talking about non-plug-in, non-future fuels, but I want to reiterate that Transport Evolved is safer, cleaner, smarter. Or as our tagline says, cleaner, greener, safer, and smarter, which covers any kind of technology that will make our lives easier as well as the planet better, or better for the planet, should we say? And so, interconnected smart cars come into that mix, regardless of the fuel type. And on Monday, this report from Senator Markey essentially said that cars with connected software, that's cars with connections to the internet or connections to a central server, were being put at risk. They did a fantastic segment on 60 Minutes last Sunday. The link is in the show notes, in which they demonstrated, it was a Chevy Impala. They made a big deal about blocking off all of the identifying badges, but anyone who knew cars to any extent could see that it was a Chevy Impala. They managed to inject code into the GM OnStar system to exploit a remote code execution, which ultimately gave them complete control over the car, able to operate brakes, able to operate the windshield wipers, put displays up on the dashboard. This is scary stuff. And Senator Markey says most automakers aren't prepared for aren't properly prepared for security. Now, John, a couple of weeks ago we had this problem with BMW, didn't we? This is scary stuff.
Yes, but before we discuss the problem itself, and I should say I'm quite willing to believe that this is possible, I need to add some context around 60 Minutes having a history of faking automotive coverage.
Oh, interesting.
It started a couple of decades ago. A certain run of GM pickup trucks, which ran from, I think, 1973 to the early 90s, early to the late 80s, had what were called side saddle pickup trucks. And 60 Minutes did an expose where they took one of these trucks and they T-boned it, and the thing blew up. As it turned out, they had rigged the car to blow up. And what they showed was not, in fact, a legitimate accident. It had been rigged to ignite as a demonstration of what could happen. They did the same thing with the Audi 5000 acceleration, sudden acceleration, which was also rigged. So I would like to see this test replicated by an independent third party, Consumer Reports.
So would I.
And what about Markey? I mean, the other thing to point out is that 60 Minutes, obviously, they had that faux pas with the Tesla a couple of years ago where they put an engine sound, the Foley department put an engine sound to a Tesla Model S. But more seriously, I mean, this report, this Senator Markey's report, Joe, do we think this is something to pay more attention to?
I think in general, what needs to be paid attention to is that I would say that it's coming, but in many ways it's already here, but it's not just completely proliferated, is that the Internet of Things, whether it's, your smart thermostat, your car, your coffee pot, whatever, we have all these devices that have the ability to be connected to the Internet and to each other. And the manufacturers of all of these devices really have to take security seriously. Now, is your car going to get hacked tomorrow? I mean, I drive a Leaf. Technically, there's a cell connection to the car as well. Do I have all the stuff turned on, Nissan's version of OnStar? No. I have my whole home connected, to the internet. But is there anything that anyone could really do except for really turning my lights on and off and maybe turning up the heat? No, there really isn't. But as we get forward in time and we do connect all types of things, your ovens and coffee pots and things that could cause fires, then you're going to have a problem, and especially with the connected vehicles. So I think today we have to work on the security aspect and making sure that is that's like job number one.
Agreed. And also, I think we talked about this last week. I don't really want to rehash it today. We talked about, essentially having some common sense when it came to your online passwords or your Internet of Things. Lots of password managers you can use. All right. Well, that makes sense.
Use a password manager like LastPass.
Yes.
It's free. It's awesome.
LastPass is great. That's the one I use. All right. Let's move on now to an announcement this week by Volkswagen talking about $10 million of investment into electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Now, this is an interesting one. It was made during a conference in Washington, D.C. It felt a little bit like Volkswagen might have been fishing for press here, John. Volkswagen committing $10 million in the next year to install electric vehicle charging infrastructure. That does already include the money that it's going to be spending working with BMW on installing the charging stations, the charge point. But Volkswagen said we are also going to install level 2 chargers in locations. We're also going to be installing DC CCS charging stations in various locations. But this is the interesting bit. And Volkswagen said it called on lawmakers and legislators to support electric vehicles and make them more enticing to customers using appropriate incentives and measures. But then Volkswagen also asked, while it was on Capitol Hill, asked the EPA to extend the multiplier program for credits. Now, could you explain to us, John, what that is and why that seems to show a double standard from Volkswagen?
Well, I'll do the first bit anyway, and put the second bit in context. How's that?
Yeah.
The EPA has always had standards for conventional gasoline and diesel vehicles. And then they also have bonuses to get various sorts of fuel-saving or beneficial advanced technologies into the market. The most notorious previously was the flex fuel vehicle credit, wherein if car makers spent somewhere between $80 and $100 per vehicle extra to make it capable of running on ethanol, E85, it essentially counted as almost twice the fuel economy as it would have normally. And those were largely applied to the biggest sedans, the largest SUVs, and pickup trucks by the North American manufacturers. The problem was, of course, that most of those vehicles never saw a drop of E85 because fuel was relatively hard to get. It's in less than 2% of gas stations around the country, and it's very localized in Midwestern states where it's made. So the EPA belatedly has sort of recognized that, yes, in fact, we're giving them credit for something that isn't accomplishing its purpose. But similarly, plug-in vehicles get a multiplier effect such that if you're, depending on how they do the numbers, if your plug-in hybrid has a blended fuel economy of 70 miles a gallon, say, you get more than that in the overall corporate average fuel economy rating. Volkswagen is saying, essentially, please extend this and make them more worthwhile for us to build.
Now, don't you think also, though, that it's a little cheeky of Volkswagen to go, look, you guys need to support electric vehicles more, but oh, by the way, can you keep these credits in so we don't have to make quite as many, or we don't have to be quite as proactive about?
Well, that's one interpretation. The other one could be that Volkswagen is saying they will be more appealing to us, and we will make more of them if there's a greater benefit to us. This is part of a couple of years' worth of positioning and public statements and lobbying, both in the media and in the back rooms of D.C., prior to the midterm review of the CAFE standards. Because the first lot, which go from 2012 to 2017, fixed, we're doing those, thus far the automakers met them, etc. But the second group, from 2018 to 2025, where it starts to bite harder, are subject to a midterm review, which in two sentences will be all of the green groups and lobbyists and electric car folks saying, look, the standard, they've met the standards so far, everything's fine, they can continue on this path. And the automakers beating their breasts and saying, we can't, it's too hard, it's going to cost us too much money, cars will get very expensive, people won't buy them, the industry will decline, etc., etc. So Volkswagen in this case, and remember VW was I think the only major automaker that didn't officially back the CAFE standards that were signed into effect in 2010, I think it was the second round, because they didn't treat diesel fairly, VW felt. Volkswagen is positioning itself to say, okay, we're on board with electric, we're selling them now, we're going to have plug-in hybrids in most of our lines. Step up, make them worth it for us to sell more of them. So this is, I wouldn't say posturing, position.
Okay. Joe, we have seen Volkswagen this week also announce that it's buying some fuel cell patents. Rather than take up Hyundai or Toyota on their offers of free fuel cell patent, it's going to buy some from a Canadian firm that it has been using already in some of its some of the Audi and Volkswagen prototype hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, but spent 80 to 100 million on these hydrogen fuel cell patents. That's a massive difference to the 10 million spent on electric infrastructure, and it has upset some people already. I've had several people contact me who say, oh, that this is just proof that Volkswagen's really not behind electric, they just want hydrogen. But how do you view it? Because, and I'm not sure, John, if you'd like to weigh in on this as well, I view this as Volkswagen playing to its strengths. It's always been an automaker that is fuel agnostic in my view. Joe, I don't know what you think.
Well, and I actually didn't see this until I was going over the show notes. And I think you're right in terms of the word agnostic, because Volkswagen has been one of the automakers that has always had diesel vehicles on some level, and they still offer a number of vehicles, I believe, that sort of have that option of which one you want. So maybe that's the direction that they're going towards. Obviously, on this show, I know that there's been quite a lot of debate on whether fuel cells are really the future or not. And there's always this one camp and there's another camp and so forth. But maybe they know something that we don't. I mean, maybe they're in the Toyota camp and they feel that that there is some hidden gem, there's some hidden nugget of fuel cells down the road a bit that it'll turn into if they make this investment right now. And like you said, they just bought the patents to it. They didn't actually buy something physical. So obviously they buy the patents, that's one thing. Then they have to actually make the patents work. Now, I don't know this for sure. Have they done anything else with fuel cell vehicles in the past?
Other than their test program, they've got a fleet, haven't they, John, in California at the moment of Passat high motion.
Does Volkswagen have fuel cell vehicles? I'm not remembering.
I seem to recall when they unveiled I think it would have been in the LA Auto Show last November.
Oh, yes, of course.
They had a Passat high motion, which they'd said they'd had a small fleet of those vehicles running around. And this same Canadian company.
They had a Passat, that's right.
Yeah.
And then a show car that was, I believe, a Volkswagen.
That's it. And Volkswagen had said, we've been testing these in California quietly. And the company that they've just bought the patents from was the company that helped them with it. And there is an engineering contract that goes on. This is a long-term partnership that Audi and Volkswagen have been in for several years already and will continue through until beyond, I think, 2019, 2020. So this is a long-term thing. But it's
quite possible that the fuel cells, even though, again, they're still not really viable today, except on the space station or the old space shuttle. At the end of the day, this may change with additional technology advances. And personally, I'm all for like your mission of this show, Nikki, in terms of its cleaner, smarter, greener technologies to get us around this planet. And I have a feeling that over the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to still look at a multitude of these technologies, and one technology may not be the one that rules them all until maybe there's some magical advance several years from now that something takes over. But fuel cells don't seem to be the best bang for the buck at this point.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll move on to the final story of the segment, and then we have to let John go. Not literally. John has another appointment, and because we started late, John has been very gracious and hung around. But this one is about incentives. This week, the French government, John, announced a €10,000 incentive program to get effectively clunkers off the street, specifically diesel clunkers. This is the latest in a long story in France. 80% of all vehicles in France are diesel. John, why has France been so supportive of diesel cars?
Diesels simply have better fuel economy. And in the days when certainly France doesn't produce its own oil, so the less oil they had to import, the better. And at that point, if I recall my history, diesel has been tax advantaged in France for something like 3 decades, stemming from a tax increase on liquid fuels in which the French truck drivers went on strike. Due to the increase
I remember that.
in diesel. So diesel didn't get the tax increase, and ever since then it's been cheaper.
Mm-hmm. And of course, diesel engines are generally harder working and less temperamental than your run-of-the-mill injection petrol engine.
Indeed. Certainly older diesels. The new ones are pretty complex technically with very high pressure injectors. But the funny thing is, Europe is right now in the process of adopting Euro 6 emissions requirements, which are fundamentally similar to those in effect in the U.S. since 2008. Those emission standards eliminate effectively all of the soot that comes from the older diesels. So what France is reacting to now is something that's just being legislated away anyway, although the older European diesels are, in fact, pretty dirty.
Right. And there is a lot, the thing that I'm not sure about here, and the incentive is very simple. If you've got a diesel vehicle over 10 years old, the French government will give you €10,000 to buy an electric car. That is, I believe, unless someone tells me differently, and I haven't been able to confirm this entirely, on top of already existing incentives. So if you live somewhere like certain parts of Normandy, for example, you've already got €5,000 discount. So you could, if you live in the right part of France, get an electric car like the Zoe for less than an equivalent gasoline or diesel car. But there is a problem here. In France, they have this class of vehicle, quadricycle. We have it across Europe. In France, in the UK, if you have a quadricycle, you still have to have a driving test. You have to have a driving license to use one, either a motorcycle license or a car license, depending on the type of vehicle. In France, these vehicles can be bought without your needing a permit. So in rural parts of France, you get all these little tiny quadricycles like the Aixams, the Ligiers. They are tiny, tiny little 2-seat vehicles. Some of them have 4 seats. They have a limited top speed of somewhere between 30 and 50 miles an hour. They don't require the tax and the MOT like other normal vehicles. And a lot of them are powered by these tiny 2-cylinder, 2-stroke diesel engines. I wonder, John, if France is now going to have to crack down on those as well.
I honestly don't know the answer to that one. Nor do I know whether the quadricycle version of the Renault Twizy, because remember, I believe there are 2.
Yes, there is.
One's more powerful. The quadricycle one's the less powerful one. I don't know if that qualifies for the 10,000 euro subsidy.
I don't know.
It's also worth pointing out France is the largest manufacturer of electric vehicles in all of Europe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is.
And, the Renault-Nissan alliance, Nissan has made about 3/4 of the 200,000 plus battery electric cars that the alliance has made, but Renault's made 50,000 of them.
Yes.
So they are supporting domestic industry, or at least the presumption is that some large portion of those electric cars that get bought to replace diesels will be Renault.
Mm-hmm. And I should bring you up, by the way, on the quadricycle thing. There are 2 different classes of quadricycle. There's the light quadricycle and the heavy quadricycle. The heavy quadricycles you do need driving licenses for. The light quadricycles you don't. So the Renault Twizy, for example, the 80, they call it the Renault Twizy 80 because it's got the top speed of 80 kilometers an hour. You need a license for that one, but you don't need one for the Twizy. It's going to be Twizy 30, which has the top speed of. Sorry, the Twizy 50, which has the top speed of 50 kilometers an hour. In the UK this week, also they announced a new tiered system where electric vehicle credits. In fact, the electric vehicle credits, I've noticed there's no mention of the word electric vehicle anymore. They've got rid of the plug-in car grant, or they will on April 1st, and replace it with a ULEV, ultra-low emission vehicle grant. Same amount of money, £5,000 at the moment, but ultimately vehicles will be tiered according to their emissions, or rather their emissions per kilometre average, and also how many miles they can travel in zero emissions mode. This, I think, probably means that hydrogen fuel cell vehicles will be rolled into that credit as well. But do we think it's too early to start tiering vehicles? I mean, electric vehicles have taken off in the UK in the last couple of months quite dramatically. But Joe, I mean, would this work in Arizona, for example, a tiered system?
Well, in terms of emission, I mean, we have a few tiers as it is out. I mean, in the U.S. and in California has a couple different standards that they did. So I mean, obviously we have a little bit of this as it is. I think less confusion on the consumer part is what we would be looking at in terms of if there's going to be new standards, especially. I'm sorry, I have to look at the notes because I didn't see this story before now. In terms of the incentives, so I think really it's less confusion in terms of what needs to be done for this for people going to a dealership and looking at standards.
Yeah, absolutely. John,
sorry. I found out that the U.S. already has a tiered standard for plug-in vehicles, passenger vehicles. It's done by battery pack size, which is a sort of a rough proxy for electric range or zero emission range, if you like. It has to be 4 kilowatt hours minimum. That's where the Prius plug-in comes in, which has its 11 miles of range. 16 kilowatt hours is the maximum, which is the Chevy Volt, which means 50 miles of range or more. Originally 35 miles of range or more up to a Tesla. But I would argue that if the policy goal is to incentivize cars that have no tailpipe emissions, then in fact these tiered incentives are exactly the right way to do it. Give more money to cars that can travel further without tailpipe emissions.
And it's going to have some issues in the UK though, because at the moment our most popular plug-in vehicle is the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid. At the moment that gets a 0% benefit in kind for company car tax. Company car tax is notoriously quite expensive. In other words, if you have a company car, you have to pay tax on the benefit of having a car that's not yours that you get to use for your personal use. At the moment, the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid does not attract that. On April 1st, it will start having benefit in kind tax levied against it. It will be a low percentage, but it will be there. So I expect lots of Mitsubishi Outlanders to be sold between now and April 1st, and then sales will go down. John, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm sorry that you have to go, and I'm sorry that you've been very patient, by the way. Thank you very much for being so patient with our technical problems. Where can people find out more about you?
Always a pleasure. Stop by and visit us at greencarreports.com. And see you next time.
Fantastic. And now it's just Joe and I. Joe, we can do that at the end of the show on our own, as it were. But
there we go.
But first of all, if you want to support us, there is one thing that you can do, and that is head to our shop.
Do you enjoy the show? Do you like wearing fun and unique clothes that support the things you love? Then you're going to want to head over to www.transportevolved.com/shop, where you can show support of Transport Evolved by buying one of our fabulous Transport Evolved branded apparel. We've got everything from hoodies and t-shirts to water bottles, badges and tote bags, and they'll be sent direct from our partners at Spreadshirt to your home address in double quick time. What's more, by buying something from our shop, you'll be sending us a little kickback as a thanks for our hard work on the show, and you'll get something unique and fun, and we'll get some warm fuzzy feelings knowing we can continue to bring you a great show every week. What's not to love?
We're back after that ad break. If you're watching the live stream, you would have just seen... Well, no one's watching the live stream. Those who are listening to the live stream, they would have heard some really weird stuff going on there. We're just going to pretend it didn't happen. Joe, just you and I, Joe Dugandzic, from Arizona, lighting answers on the YouTubes.
It's technically Dugandzic, by the way.
Dugandzic, sorry. There you go. My day's just getting worse. I'm sorry. Will you forgive me?
Oh, yeah.
We are finally in the final segment of the show, and Tesla had its Q4 earnings call this week, and it made some losses in 2014 at the end
not
of
entirely unexpected to be
not
frank.
Yeah, okay. So
I don't think. I mean, maybe the investors thought, oh, well, they lost money, a big surprise, or they were surprised. But I don't know why that would be the case.
Tesla
They
spent so much money.
They're spending so much money. I mean, hello. I mean, they're not. Tesla is not Apple. They don't have $150 billion in the bank.
Well, again, of course, the minute this finished, then there were calls. Tesla needs to be bought by Apple. Yada. It's not going to happen.
And then strangely, the same week, we see all this, in Apple news that Apple is like building their own car, which is completely probably not going to happen.
I don't think that's the case.
I think they're working on technology for vehicles, and they're just
yes, yeah. I don't think Apple, unless maybe they are. Maybe they've got a skunk works somewhere, but that would have to be a really...
They would have to change all their stores, because you're not going to fit a car showroom in the stores. So they're going to have to change the stores for the Apple Watch as it is. So,
Have a line. This side for the iPhone. But the other reason why they couldn't have... I'm sorry, Apple, I shouldn't say this. The other reason why they couldn't do it is because they're tech. They just hardware swap all the time. I'm on my third iPhone.
Are you going to buy a new Apple car every year?
All right, back to Tesla. So Tesla did make, I think it was a 13 cents per share loss using the non-GAAP, and I think it was 70 something using the GAAP method. For those who don't know the difference, the non-GAAP allows Tesla to account for all the money that it's kind of got tied up in value resale programs, etc., whereas the non-GAAP essentially goes, if it's not in the bank and you've not got it as an asset right here, right now, it doesn't count.
And I read that they put both of those numbers out because of the way that they sell the car. It's not because they don't have a dealer network; they sell it direct, so they can't take the same. They can't make the same financial kind of calculations and gimmicks that the regular automakers do.
Right, and when an automaker sells a car, it sells the car to the dealer then sells it to the customer.
Right.
And so when they do the financing, generally the individual dealer arranges the financing. With Tesla, it's Tesla arranging the financing with the customer and goes from there. But some interesting things here, Joe, and one I really, really want to talk to you about. Okay, so the Model X is coming, said Elon Musk, talking about 30 prototypes driving around. There have been some spy shots. John had one over at Green Car Reports earlier this week. And then we talked about the what do they call it? The release candidate version of the car is going to be built next month. The Model X. And then once that's been tested and approved, then they'll do the pre-production car, and then they'll enter production, hopefully by Q3 this year. Now, interestingly, Tesla said it's not going to unveil the car until it's delivering them, which is really weird.
It is pretty weird. I wish, and I guess automakers really cannot be like, consumer electronics companies like Apple, where they come out with something, they launch it, and it's done, and it's ready for sale, because they have to be on the roads, they have to test it, and, someone's going to discover it, plus they have to go through all the tooling and the regulations and all the approvals. But I do wish, because everyone I think collectively everyone feels like we've been waiting for the Model X for about 30 years at this point, even though it's been less than 5. I just think people are ready for this to come out. They don't want to hear about any more delays. They just want it to be there. And, we're just seeing the birth of, Tesla over the past, over its lifetime. And it's difficult to release these new cars and, and keep up with expectations. Right. But I do think they will come out. And I guess we'll just have to love it when they unveil the final production version. And
I guess those who have reserved their car, I think I would be you'd have to be pretty trusting, though.
I think obviously, yes, it's so much innovation in the car, but personally, because I am kind of a Back to the Future and DeLorean fan, I really like the Falcon doors. I think that's like the most awesome feature of the car.
Yep, but still, I gotta reiterate, if someone says to you, you've got this deposit down on a car, but you don't know the final specs until it arrives on your driveway.
Is it a refundable deposit?
I don't know. I might be wrong. Maybe Tesla's going to contact all the buyers quietly and go, well, you have to sign this disclaimer. We're not going to publicly talk about it.
Right.
All right. Now, this is the really exciting thing. Sorry, you were going to say something.
No, go ahead. No.
So here's a really exciting thing. Musk said in the earnings call, the press conference call afterwards, that Tesla's going to be building a battery for homes. It's going to have a two-way power conduit, so you can connect to a car and power both ways. Built-in inverter. Very slim. It will fit on the wall using Tesla technology. We're talking about a Model S battery hanging on the wall that your house can run from, aren't we, Joe? Essentially.
That's exactly right. And actually, over many years, it has been talked about by people who have solar installations on their homes. Some of the ones who are a little bit more on the DIY, and they set it up that basically they can be essentially nearly completely off the grid. And the only way to do that is to have local storage. Now, it has always been ridiculously expensive. A, put the solar panels in. B, put in some kind of storage unit. And it really hasn't been standard. It's like, you don't know as a potential solar power system owner of, where do you get these battery packs? Where do you, it's a lot of DIY, except for the panels, which you can get through like Solar City and other companies these days. So right. I think Tesla entering the market is great. I think it's a great time to do it because they have the cachet, they have the name, it's the reliability, and it's perfect. He didn't say the price. He didn't say what was it going to. Did they actually mention? Was it going to be the lower size battery pack from like a typical Model S? I didn't see any of those details.
I didn't see any of those details. And all Tesla's done is it's confirmed after the event. Tesla said this is going to happen. So Tesla's
6 months.
Press people have said
they're going to be selling them.
They're going to be selling them. Well, it makes sense. If Gigafactory's coming online, you need to make as many batteries as you possibly can and sell them in as many different ways so that you're making money for the car. I'd love one.
This would really help. A, the solar industry, but B, just having reliable backup power for your home.
And do you think this also means that Tesla will maybe be able to help leverage some backlash against? I think Arizona is one of the states that has it. This idea of a tax that you pay if you've got solar panels.
Yes, it's happening this month. There's a big there's something going on with I believe it's SRP. It's either SRP or APS, one of the two power companies that wants to increase the taxes and increase the fees on solar users because they're not paying as much into the system to maintain the rest of the grid. Well, if they can go completely off the grid or 95% off the grid, I think those people would be happy to do so and kind of sort of screw the power company and say, we're off grid, you can't charge us, a lot of money anyways. This is great to see as another option and another piece of the mix of the solar and the off grid. I don't know if it's a community quite yet, but it's growing, so it's definitely needed.
Yeah.
And I applaud Tesla for getting in the game.
It's going to be an interesting time. All right, Pacific Gas and Electric. Should read my show notes more carefully. Big utility in Central and Northern California announced this week that it's going to apply to regulators to install huge number of charging stations, 25,000 new electric vehicle charging stations across the region. In order to do that, though, it's going to raise utility bills for customers, all of its customers, and it needs to get permission to do that. Now, I personally wouldn't mind paying a few extra cents per kilowatt hour, but do you think this is going to be something that there's going to be a backlash against?
Well, there may be, and some people would say, well, I don't have an electric vehicle, so why should I pay for that? Similar to the solar equation, they don't want to pay for the rest of the grid if they're not really using it. So I don't know. It's funny that the story that I read the same story earlier this week, and the story did not include the detail of that they're going to go to the commissions and ask for a rate increase. It just stated they're going to do this massive rollout, and I said, wow, that's great. They're doing it out of the goodness of their own hearts, for Valentine's Day. But obviously not. They need to recoup that. Now, how much that's going to be, I don't know. Obviously, everything seems to be more expensive in California, so obviously they pay for more on electricity than we do here in Arizona or other places. So I don't know what that would be.
It's maybe not going to be a massive rise. That's what I understand.
Yeah, maybe if it's low enough, if it's like a penny or two. I mean, the charging stations are not that expensive. I mean, that's a humongous, what did they say, 25,000?
Yeah.
That's a large number. It would be a beneficial thing. California is very green, so, in terms of energy conscious consumers, so maybe it'll just be like, yeah, sure, it's fine. They've got a Democratic governor, so
we'll see what happens. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now let's go on to autonomous vehicles. This week, we saw a really interesting survey that came out that said that the birth of autonomous vehicles will halve the number of privately owned cars. Now, some people have been saying this is overhyped. This came from the University of Michigan, their transportation, one of their transportation research departments. And the essential gist of this is that while some younger people will get rid of their car altogether, and they'll go towards car sharing or autonomous ride sharing programs, in 10, 20 years time when autonomous cars hit the roads, and they won't bother owning their own car. Those who want to have their own car still will find that they'll only need one car. If they had 2 cars previously, they will only need one. And if they had 3 cars or more, they will now be able to just survive with 2. Because, says the report, a lot of families, your typical all-American nuclear family, if there is such a thing, one parent goes out early in the morning to work, the other stays at home, takes the kids to school, and the one who went to work early picks the kids up from school, and etc., etc. And what this report suggests is that you could go to work, if you're the adult who leaves first, you go to work and then you send the car back home to pick up your spouse and children. So the car is going backwards and forwards all day for the various errands, and you only need one car. Now, I disagree with this report, Joe.
Why do you disagree with it?
Because I think that this would mean that we would end up in a situation where we're going to have lots more cars on the roads in both directions during rush hour. At the moment, rush hours generally tend to be one direction, don't they?
True.
So people travel into town. But if you're having this situation where the car's going back home again, especially to suburbia, the road's going to be busy in both directions. How are we going to cope with that?
I think autonomous vehicles, and assuming they can't be hacked so that your vehicle, winds up, driving itself into the ocean or something like that. I think that we are now, obviously we don't really have any autonomous actually vehicles yet that are really driving people around. But depending on who you ask, that's between 3 and 10 years away. It is a problem, and here's why I think that ultimately there's going to have to be a mix. There's going to be a mix between autonomous vehicles, non-autonomous vehicles, transit systems, regular ones, the more advanced transit systems like PRT that are coming online now. Because the one thing that most people don't count into this equation is that all except unless on a freeway, you're dealing still with a two-dimensional street grid and even if that's made up of traffic circles, there's still people yielding at traffic circles when they're really busy. And otherwise, you have stop signs, you have signalized intersections, and I don't care. You would have to create a tremendous amount of computing power and prediction algorithms to try to synchronize all of that to prevent gridlock. And you're right that you could have all these extra autonomous vehicles going in both directions. Rush hour could be all day long, and it could be terrible. So I think it's going to have to be balanced. And I really, personally, if you ask me, I think that autonomous vehicles are going to be used more for getting you back and forth to shorter distance trips, and they're going to get you back and forth between sort of transit stations, and then ultimately you'll take some sort of dedicated transit system closer to your location, and then you may get into another autonomous vehicle or a bike or something else to get to your final destination.
Okay.
I think all autonomous vehicles, like replacing all of our cars right now, would be a mess.
And I think also there's a cost element, isn't there?
Of course.
It's going to be expensive. Not everyone's going to be able to do it. All right. Final story then. This week, the UK announced or launched some new autonomous vehicle driving programs, including a couple actually, that are based on tiny little pod electric vehicles. The concept of low-speed pedestrian area vehicles that could drive around in pedestrian zones. And I can't help but feeling really kind of let down by that, Joe, because, well, I don't want a car driving. I don't want an autonomous electric vehicle to be thought of this weird little low speed thing that you take around town. Am I not being futuristic enough?
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think that's okay to feel that way, because it's the same thing when Google actually trotted out their actual prototypes of their autonomous vehicles, and they weren't the Prius with the giant thing on top. It was like these cutesy looking cars that only went like 25 miles an hour. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for more people trying to push into the future and trot ideas out and so forth. But again, it's one of the reasons, a specific example, it's one of the reasons that monorails really have never truly taken off as a transportation option, even though they're very safe and so forth, and efficient, is because people just think they're a ride at Disneyland and that they're not really a real solution. When for certain uses that they are. And you're right that if people see autonomous vehicles and electric autonomous vehicles as these cutesy little cars that don't go very fast, they're going to think, well, electric cars aren't very cool. But Tesla continues to make enough headlines and people put out the P85D against all these other cars that the Tesla is still pretty sexy. So maybe this is really balanced out.
Maybe.
By
Maybe.
Tesla.
Maybe. All right. Yeah, well,
maybe. That's
it for today's show. Thank you very much for staying until the end of the show, Joe, and thanks for putting up with all the problems. I know that, as you said at the beginning, you used to do this yourself.
I understand.
So,
I understand your pain.
And it's a one-person setup, so I don't have an engineer.
I had a one-person setup too, to be honest. So it's I get it, but you're right that it would be ideal to have 3 or 4 people.
We need an engineer. We need an engineer.
Can I plug something real quick?
Sure, go nuts.
So this is, I just got these in the mail, so I had been contacted and it's now published. So I'm now on the lighting side of things. I'm now doing a series for Electric Vehicle Insider Magazine, or Electric Car Insider Magazine. and they're on newsstands. You can get it online at their site. Part of it's online, but anyways, I'm doing a series of articles for them on LED lighting and greening your home through lighting options and home automation and so forth. And the magazine itself is at independent bookstores and at Barnes & Noble throughout the U.S. So check it out, and it's a pretty awesome magazine too.
And,
on electric
and
cars.
check out your YouTube channel as
And
well.
my article series. And YouTube. The YouTube channel is blowing up really big right now. We have over 20,000 views since we started, which is awesome.
Yay.
And again, that's at youtube.com/lightinganswers. And I'm now doing a weekly release of new episodes. So
Woohoo.
super happy, and thank you for everyone's support on that.
Great. Fantastic. And next week there won't be a live show for a very good reason. I'll be driving. Where will I be next week? I'll be somewhere in Germany, France, or Belgium, and I can't really say any more than that. I've been invited.
You're going to be traveling to a secret location.
Oh, well, I've been invited to fly to Norway to drive a Tesla back to England. It's such a hard job.
Oh.
It's going to be myself and the wonderful
Can I join
Robert
you?
Llewellyn.
Can I be in the passenger seat?
I would love you to be. Unfortunately, the wonderful Robert Llewellyn is doing it with me instead. He's going to be driving, and I'm going to be driving. We'll be sharing it, and we're driving, as I say, from Oslo back to London. For me, it's not going to be about a long-distance EV drive. It's just going to be about getting 1,200 miles of test drive experience in the kind of weather that we don't normally get in this part of the world. So that's why I'm doing it. I'm not sure what Robert's doing. I suspect we'll find out very soon. So in the meantime, I hope that everyone enjoying today will come back in 2 weeks' time. We will try and get a special out if we can, but I can't promise anything. In the meantime, TEN will come out as normal. We've had some changes there. We're adding the show notes links to the show notes in the actual video if you're watching on YouTube, which is a very useful thing. There are subtitles too, so if you don't understand my accent, you can watch the subtitles. It's very simple. Until then, though, until 2 weeks' time, folks, have a great time, and don't forget to plug in. See you soon. Take care. Thanks a lot. Bye.